Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ground and Pound podcast, best bets video for UFC Fight Night. Carlos Prates taking on Garry live from Kansas City. And I'm excited for this main event, and I got some nice best bets for you this week that I feel pretty confident in. So hit that like and subscribe button. Let's get right into the picks. So, first off, we have Abus Nurmagomedov, and he's taking on Michel Pereira this week, the ever-dangerous Michel Pereira. Very, very live in the first round, but I believe that Abus has all the wrestling and all the grappling in his back pocket here that he can get Michel Pereira tired early in this fight, just like Fluffy Hernandez did in their last matchup in that main event. I think Abus comes in here, honestly, in the best shape of his life in his last fight. I think there will be no different here. I think his cardio holds up like it's been doing in the last few fights. I think he's turned a new leaf, and he's looked better since that Sean Strickland loss that he had in that main event at the Apex. And I think he comes in here. I think he wrestles heavy early. I think he gets Michel Pereira tired and ultimately wins either in a late finish in the third round when Michel Pereira's got nothing left in his gas tank, or he wins a clear decision here using his wrestling as his last name would suggest. And I like the fact that he can mix it up on the feet as well. You know, he is a viable striker. He does have nice striking. But I think here he comes in. I think he wrestles. I think that's the game plan here against Michel Pereira. I think he will have to withstand Michel Pereira's early onslaught. He is very dangerous in the first round. But I think, honestly, I think he comes in here. I think he wrestles. I think he has a nice game plan here to ultimately get the win and kicks us off with one of our first bets on the Best Bets video. And that brings us to our second Moneyline play, which is the Dog of the Week. And if you haven't seen it already, I did post a video earlier on in the week for our Dog of the Week, so some of you are going to be aware who he is. And it is this week, Carlos Prates in the main event. I like him here as my favorite betting underdog on this particular card. I'm not going to bore you with the long, drawn-out breakdown. If you want to check out why I like Carlos Prates in detail, I'll leave a link in the description for the Dog of the Week video that I posted earlier on in the week. But I think Carlos Prates comes in here, keeps the momentum going for those fighting nerds, and ultimately gets it done here against Garry. I think he might win a decision. I know Garry is pretty elusive. He is pretty good on the feet. I do think Carlos Prates is going to have the bigger moments here and ultimately be able to get this fight done. If you're interested in a little bit more drawn-out breakdown and more of a in-depth, up-to-date breakdown, check out my Dog of the Week video that I posted later on in the week. But Carlos Prates is going to be our second Moneyline bet here on the Best Bets video this week. And that brings us to our confident play of the week, ladies and gentlemen. And to kick us off, we have Ikram Alaskarov. I think this is a great stylistic matchup for him here against Muniz. Muniz really just a jiu-jitsu practitioner who, you know, doesn't necessarily always have the wrestling to get fights to the ground. His striking is very, very basic. Whereas Ikram, you know, he's only lost to two high-level guys in Hamzat Chimaev, which is no excuse. You know, that's not a bad loss by any means. It's not one we can really hold against him. And Robert Whittaker, who's, you know, still a top 3, top 2 guy in the division. So I think he comes in here. I think his striking is much, much better than Muniz. I think if he wants to wrestle, he can. I think he can win this fight wherever it goes, and he's going to kick us off with the confident level parlay here as the first leg. And we have Jacqueline Omorim as the second leg. I think that she dog walks Polyana Viana in this matchup. She's high-level black belt, 2-time Pan Am Games world champion. There's levels to black belts, and she is one of the higher level decorated black belts. I think she gets this fight to the ground. I think she finds a submission ultimately here. We've seen with Polyana Viana in a lot of her matchups, she is live in the first round, but once she doesn't finish you in the first, she does tend to tire out. I think that's when Jacqueline Amorim gets the submission here after getting the takedowns, and she kicks off the second leg of our confident parlay. And we also have the last leg, and obviously I mentioned him for the Dog of the Week, but I like him here with the spread. I think plus 5.5 spread is a great third leg for our confident parlay. Reason being is because I think if there's going to be a finish, I think it's going to be on the Carlos Prates side. I think, honestly, the only way that Garry is going to be able to win this fight in terms of the spread is going to be by getting the finish, and I just don't see Garry finishing Prates. I think if this fight does go to a decision and Garry wins it, that's the only way he's going to win it. But with the 5.5 spread, we'll be covered. I think Prates is going to win a couple of rounds here, even if he does lose, which I don't think he's going to. The 5.5 spread's going to cover us because I think he's going to have rounds where he's going to knock Garry down, or he's going to wobble him, or just win some striking exchanges to ultimately be able to win a couple of rounds, which, if you're unaware of the plus 5.5, it basically gives us plus 5.5 on the judges' scorecards. We also have the guy that I think is more live for a finish here as the third leg of our confident parlay this week. And that brings us to the chalk parlay, and there's a pretty nice number of chalky money lines here on this particular card. Obviously, we have had 2 weeks since the last UFC event, so a lot of these money lines are a little bit juiced up. And we're going to kick things off with Damon Blackshear here. I think that he gets it done here against Halatong Hae. I think he gets this fight to the ground. I think he shows off his superior submission skills. I think he's the more athletic striker. He's got much more of a reach advantage in this particular matchup, and I just like this fight wherever it goes for Blackshear. I think honestly that Halatong Hae, he is a good wrestler, but I think if he wrestles here, I think Blackshear's going to be able to sweep and ultimately find a top position where he can do damage or ultimately find a submission. And we've seen Halatong Hae get submitted in the past and finished in the past as well. So I like Blackshear here to kick us off with the confident chalk parlay here. And Jocelyn Edwards, and I had to do it. I had to make her the second leg here. Obviously, a little bit juiced and not necessarily one of my confident picks, but we had to kind of round off the chalk parlay here. But Jocelyn Edwards should honestly beat Chelsea Chandler. Chelsea Chandler is a terrible UFC fighter overall. She is the better striker in Jocelyn Edwards. She has been taken down in the past, but I do think that she's been working consciously knowing that that's her weakness, is being taken down and held up against the fence. I think she comes in here, she just beats Chelsea Chandler on the feet, pillar to post, with her striking and her speed advantage that she'll have on the feet. Obviously, women's MMA can be a little bit tricky, but Jocelyn should win this one. And honestly, as well, I don't see how Anthony Smith gets out of this one with Zhang. I honestly think Zhang's going to be able to come in here and get the knockout here on Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith, very, very chinny at this point in his part of his career. I think he should have retired a long time ago. And I think Zhang, the Mountain Tiger, as he likes to be called, I think he comes in here and gets the first round knockout as the third leg in our chalk parlay here, almost right at even money, but just something to consider for these bigger money lines this week. I like this parlay. I think it's definitely going to hit as long as Jocelyn Edwards keeps this fight on the feet. And there's a few little parlays that I had in mind this week, and there was a few other money lines that I wanted to get to. They're not quite even money, so I thought we could throw them all together in a Kansas City parlay. That's what I'm calling this one this week, for some extra plus money. And I've gone over 1.5 in the Chelsea Chandler Edwards fight. I think it's going to be Chelsea Chandler grinding Edwards up against the fence, which is going to run the clock down. I think Edwards is going to keep it mostly at striking range and just kind of pitter-patter against a pretty big orc-looking Chelsea Chandler. She's very durable, so I think this fight definitely gets over 1.5. And then we have Roberto Romero. Roberto Romero really impressed me in his UFC debut against David Onama, who is going to be the third leg in our parlay, funny enough. But he dropped David Onama in that fight. He took that fight on less than a week's notice, so his cardio didn't hold up. But fighting a guy like Timothy Kawamba, I think he's going to get this done here. He's going to be the superior striker. I think if it gets to the ground, I think he's going to have much more experience in terms of jiu-jitsu, being a brown belt. Timothy Kawamba is pretty much just a crisp boxer. However, I think all of the power is on the side of Romero here. I think he gets it done as our second leg of our Kansas City parlay here. And we also have David Onama fighting Giga Chikadze. And I think the reason that I really like Onama this week is just because his actual style of fighting suits the opponent that he's fighting. He's a come-forward boxer with heavy hands, and that pressure and him training at altitude now over in Denver means that his cardio and his pressure is going to be a big factor. And when we watch Giga Chikadze, a lot of his fights usually don't go well when his opponent pressures him and keeps the fight within boxing range, and that's exactly how David Onama is going to fight here. I really like him in this particular matchup against Giga Chikadze. Also, Giga is also 36 years old at this point. He's very one-dimensional. I think Onama can also mix in wrestling if he wants to ultimately get the decision done and hopefully cashes our Kansas City parlay this week. And that brings us to some props, ladies and gentlemen, for all of you guys who are interested in a little bit more plus money. I've got Jimmy Flick here by submission, and this is really just a value play on the spot. I think, honestly, if Jimmy Flick's going to win, it's probably going to be by submission. That's usually his path to victory in most of his fights. But we've seen time and time again with Matt Schnell, his fight IQ lets him down time and time again. If Matt Schnell keeps the fight on the feet, I do think he can knock Flick out. However, we've seen Jimmy Flick at times, he's an absolute wizard on the ground. So I think if Matt Schnell, decides to take this fight to the ground, Flick is very, very live for a submission here at plus 275. And as I mentioned earlier, our second prop here, we have Carlos Prates by decision, plus 600. I think there's value in that. I mean, and the reason I went with the decision prop is obviously a lot of juice and a lot of people talking about how Prates has been knocking everybody out. Well, you got to think, I mean, Garry went to 5 rounds with Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's a born finisher. The guy's, full of finishes, and Garry was able to go the distance there with him. So I think Carlos Prates comes in here. I think he wins multiple rounds. Garry might take over late, maybe win rounds 4 or 5, or maybe round 5. But ultimately, I think Prates wins a decision here, and I think there's a lot of value in the plus money for the decision. So I like him here as our second prop of the best bets video. And as I mentioned earlier with Jacqueline Omarine, second round submission here, plus 350. And I like it second round purely because I think Polyana Viana is very good in the first round. I think when she's got a lot of energy behind her and she's not necessarily too tired, she can defend well on the ground. I think that first round could be fairly competitive. I think Jacqueline Omarine is eventually going to get this fight to the ground once Polyana Viana does get tired. I think Omarine's going to be able to get her down in the second round and ultimately find the submission at plus 350. And as always, guys, I like to show you guys the betting layout. So if you guys are tailing along at home, I don't necessarily talk through this, but if you want to pause the video and check that out, it's the unit size that I have on each individual bet if you are tailing along at home. And before we do wrap things up, I got to let you guys know what's coming on the channel here. And on Sunday, Carlos and I do a recap video of the entire UFC Kansas City video. We do one every single Sunday. It's just 2 guys kicking back, talking about the fights, talking about what we saw. Do we agree with the decisions? We put some of the referees on blast. It's a very chill vibe there on that particular recap video. So check that one out on Sunday. Keep an eye out for that. And also we have the full card breakdown for the PFL. We have the light heavyweights and heavyweights coming up on Tuesday. Keep an eye out for that video. Carlos and I do a full breakdown. We usually keep that one pretty short, pretty snappy for you guys. So tune into that if you're enjoying the PFL content. We like to keep it here on the Ground and Pound podcast. And we also have the full card breakdown for Corey Sandhagen, taking on Davidson Figueiredo in Des Moines, Iowa, which is next Saturday. We're doing a full card breakdown on Tuesday, the same day as that PFL video is coming out. So keep an eye out for that. 2 videos for you on the same day. And also we have Straight to the Point Picks, a new show that I've just brought out on the channel. If you're tired of the long drawn out breakdowns and you just want to get through the whole entire card and know who we're picking with a short breakdown as to why I'm picking that individual, I try to keep it 15 to 20 minutes or less of the full card breakdown, then that video is going to be for you. It is basically a quick picks video. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying the content on the Ground and Pound podcast, hit that like and subscribe button. We appreciate the love and support. And let me know in the comments who you have in the main event and who you're betting on and what you're tailing this week for the best bets video. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace.